to enjoy the session as well.
Make it sexy.
Right? But the physicality of the business, as you called out, the metaphysicality of.
I think great leadership is the ability to ask the right questions.
The role of a mentor is that of a navigation app. While you might be smart.
So that's going to be the last session, which is going to be really enriching. Now, time for me to invite for the third session of the day on R&D and innovation, Dr. Bala Tanjore, Chief Product and Technology Officer, Impactus, Dr. Kanagasabapati Subramaniam, Senior Vice President, Ashok Leyland, Mr. Ganesh Adiga, Vertical Head, EV, Mahindra and Mahindra Limited, and to moderate the session, Mr. Varun Prakash, Partner McKinsey and Company. So all the four speakers are on the stage. Let's give them a big round of applause. I think we're going to have a fabulous session on R&D and innovation. May I have the AV, please?
Dr. Bala Tanjore is a distinguished AI scientist and Chief Product and Technology Officer at Impactiers, the world's first AI-powered B2T platform, with deep expertise in AI, AGI, robotics, and deep learning. A dual PhD holder with multiple patents, Dr. Bala has led global R&D initiatives and previously worked with Steve Jobs at Apple on landmark innovations such as Apple Pay. Dr. K. Subramanian is Senior Vice President at Ashok Leyland and a distinguished engineering leader with a PhD from Cornell University and over 50 patents to his credit. A former GE Global Research Scientist and Fellow of the Indian National Academy of Engineering, Dr. Subramanian is a recipient of multiple prestigious awards for technology and innovation. Mr. Ganesh Adiga is the vertical head for electric vehicles at Mahindra and Mahindra, with over 2 decades of experience in automotive engineering, platform development, and product leadership within the Mahindra Group. An alumnus of Manipal Institute of Technology, Mr. Adiga brings deep expertise in designing and scaling next-generation mobility solutions. Mr. Varun Prakash is a partner at McKinsey and Company, advising clients on strategy, transformation, and performance across industries. Mr. Varun holds an engineering degree from Nanyang Technological University and an MBA from the University of Michigan's Ross School of Business, with prior experience at Schlumberger.
Lovely. So let's give them a big round of applause as they begin the session now. Mr. Varun, may I request you to take the session forward?
Can you hear me? Perfect. Thank you. Thank you to MMA for continuing this yearly tradition of bringing some fantastic speakers to discuss the most pressing topics. This is a topic that I care about very deeply, something I'm super passionate about. So it's a real privilege to be here with leaders who are at the forefront of innovation in their respective industries. So let me set a little bit of context for the session, and then we'll hear from our eminent panelists. On the topic of R&D and innovation, there are 3 broad questions that we'll cover, right? One is, why is R&D important? How is India doing when it comes to R&D and innovation? And how do we continue to accelerate quickly on the back of this? Right? On the question of why is R&D important, just a little bit of a little bit of a fact base on this. We did a piece of research just to look baseline the innovation quotient of Indian companies, where we surveyed more than 100 companies, right? What we found is companies that invest more in R&D and innovation tend to outperform the market 3x the TRS of bottom performers, 50% more likely to outperform on a P&L basis as well. So when you do R&D well, this actually translates into real business performance. I think that's the first thing. The second is, how is then India doing when it comes to R&D and innovation? And we've made a lot of strides in the past decade or so by any measure. If you look at the number of patents coming out of India, that's tripled in the last 5 years. If you look at global bodies that look at India's innovation index, we've been consistently going up the rankings. I think WIPO's index, we grew from 81 to 38 or so. So it's a positive journey that we're on. Having said that, there's another side to the coin, which is we spend about 0.6% of GDP on R&D and innovation. The innovation-led economies, if you look at US, China, Israel, they spend anywhere between 2.5 to 5% of GDP. So it's a stark difference in how much we focus on innovation versus the other. So I'd love to hear from the leaders as we do this discussion on how can we change that, right? So that's the second question. And then the third question is, how quickly can we accelerate? And I think we can look at some of our neighbors for inspiration here. In particular, what China has done in terms of how they've transformed their own manufacturing, how they've started driving leadership in sectors like high tech, batteries, etc. That's happened in the last decade or so. It's not a 50-year journey, it's a 10, 15-year journey. So it's possible to make a material change in a reasonably short span of time. So again, we'll explore a little bit of how can we structurally enable this as we do this discussion. So that's the context. With that out of the way, maybe I'll invite my panelists to give some opening comments, and then we'll get into the discussion. So if you're okay, Dr. Bala, if we can start with you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks, MMA, for having me here. Of course, see, ideally at the nth hour at the 3 p.m., we are talking about a beautiful topic, R&D and innovation, right? Which have to create a lot of injective juices from the brain. So I'll be very cautious of time also when answering my question. So first of all, thanks for all your patience. So this R&D is a bigger jargon, to be precise, right? I see it as a jargon. Research is everywhere, right? I'll put it in very simple examples. To conduct this session of MMA on this particular day, right, having this session at 3 p.m. with us, the people who have organized this event have done a lot of research about how to get this session on time, right? Whom to call, who are the guests who should be preceding this event, right? Who should be coming in. So the research happens everywhere. Right from the time you get from the airport to reach here, I would have done a lot of research to understand which is the best way to reach, right? So that's the reason I'm saying research and development is looking, the jargon, it looks as a big jargon, right? Put it in simple terms, for me, research is something that is impetus to a human being in every aspect. And when it actually having some total effect in the ecosystem that he gets into, that becomes a value change for the organization that he is working in. And during the course of time, the person who is also inclined to this get to learn one important thing, which is what not to do rather than what to do. So research and development is a thing which helps you to tell what not to do rather than what to do. So coming in from the sessions that I have seen from the morning, initially I thought I would be renting ears, but I was so involved right from the session in the morning. So multiple people, all the distinguished experts have spoke one thing in common, which is AI, right? So all the sessions, even including the our distinguished speaker, right, sitting up front. So he also had touched upon this AI. I see this particular concept of AI in a very different way. And of course, Gopalakrishnan sir, I love to thank you the way that you have put up in, if you are hearing me out. The human brain just uses, it's just 2% of our whole body, and it uses only 20% of the oxygen. And it is able to remember, write all my childhood memories. And today, for you to actually query a particular GPT, think about the GPUs that has to come into play, the processing that has to come into play, right? The computation that has to come into play, which is very, very massive. So not in near future. I think forever. I've been an AI guy. I've got 3 PhDs on my name, all in the space of AI, worked with some eminent people, right? Learned many things. End of the day, for me, innovation is something that you add value to the customers. All this tech is an enablement, right? Whether it is AI you are speaking in, quantum you are speaking in, any so-called jargon that you speak is just an enabler, right? What is innovation is adding something value to your customer. That is the innovation for me. And what research you do to get that value actually gives you that momentum to actually go from X to Y. So with that, I just close my thoughts. I'll give it to.
Thank you. So once again, Subramanian, Senior Vice President, Ashok Leyland, thank you for the opportunity. R&D is a topic that's very, very close to heart. I spent a lifetime in research and development. Learned a lot of very profound things along the way. I used to be a scientist in the micro and nanotechnology area, working in the US for GE, General Electric. Now, when I say nanotechnology, it sounds like science fiction even now, and I'm talking 30, 40 years ago, this was a topic that was pretty hot even in industry, which means they saw a lot of applications for the technology. So that was one of the first things I learned, that a lot of R&D actually flows backwards from the application. So we as blue-eyed scientists, we have the tendency to dream up our favorite problem, sit in a corner and work on it. But very often, a very thorough study of the market and the business case, which will only give you an application or an interesting need for the future, is always the seed for an R&D project. In other words, you start with the market and then you work backwards to figure out what technology needs to be invented to fulfill that market need. The result of that is obvious, which means when you do successfully invent technology, the market is there and waiting. That was something I learned very early on, which I have tried to apply throughout my life, a very essential life skill for an R&D person. Also, the fact that R&D is not just technology. R&D is cost, R&D is reliability, R&D is manufacturability. There are so many facets of R&D that you will have to bring in right in the very beginning of the project. And if you don't do that, the chances of failure dramatically increase later. So these are just certain lessons learned. And when I came back to India in 2010, very interestingly started what was possibly India's first R&D outsourcing firm, where we became an extended R&D lab of other people. So we had this grand noble ambition of showing the world that India has the brains and you can source next generation innovations from India. This was not in Ashok Leyland, but in my previous job in a company called Power Gear, right here in Chennai. It was a matter of pride because we had a star list of clients. Companies like Boeing were sourcing their next generation aircraft innovation from right here in Chennai. So it is possible. I think like the opening speech was mentioned. We do have the brains. What we need is the focus. So back to Ashok Leyland. So I head all the new technologies in the company. And automobile, this decade is extremely interesting because it's a decade of transition for automobile. And it makes it a little more challenging in the commercial vehicle space where Ashok Leyland plays, which is buses and trucks, because it's very difficult to get people to pay for features, pay for cool gadgets in the automobile, because you will have to really hit the bottom line of the customer. But within those constraints, I mean, you need constraints, otherwise R&D is a very free-form kind of problem. But I think we have done a pretty good job in terms of defining R&D, defining innovation. So again, back to the topic of R&D and innovation, I think there is a distinction. R&D has budgets, R&D has a process, R&D has timelines and deliverables. R&D is very clearly defined. Innovation, on the other hand, is intentionally chaotic. It's intentionally follows a lack of process, right? And innovation is driven by culture. The culture of the company has to be very conducive, or if it's not, you'll have to create that culture, at least in your own local ecosystem. And innovation serves as that pipeline for R&D. So that's what I like to think I've established in my last 5 years in Ashok Leyland. And R&D is also inherently multidisciplinary. So a company, an automobile industry that was largely filled with mechanical engineers, you would imagine is not multidisciplinary enough, right? And that's true. Today, even within technology, it's filled with a combination of mechanical, electronics, AI, materials. And there's a saying that innovation happens at the intersection of disciplines, and that's really true. Individual disciplines are starting to saturate in how much more you can innovate. And therefore, that intersection of disciplines brings in that much more capability to innovate. I myself have worked in so many fields, even including biotechnology, medical, and all that. And within an automobile sector, there's a huge combination of disciplines that's required today. So we work on a variety of topics. We work on new fuel vehicles, which includes natural gas, it includes hydrogen, it includes electric, it includes any combination of the above, also known as hybrids. We work on a lot of the smart electronics that is getting added to these automobiles, but all, as I said early on, market backwards. What value will it add to the customer? And given that value, therefore, what technology needs to be invented? It's the only thing that works. We work on lightweighting of vehicles with new materials, alternatives to steel. We work on a lot of AI technologies because AI seems to be the name of the game moving forward. But it's not AI for the sake of AI. We honestly believe that a vehicle is like a newborn child in some sense. It doesn't come with much software, right? A newborn child has the capability, it's got the inbuilt hardware to learn and learn very fast. So we are building that infrastructure first. In other words, enabling the hardware on our vehicles to acquire that capability to learn and learn fast. And just like a newborn child, you have to give it certain instincts. A newborn child can cry, it knows how to feed. And from there, it takes off, right? The first 3 years of its life, it learns a complete language. Then very quickly, it learns a lot of information from within the family. And once it goes to school, the child learns a lot of information from the ecosystem. And we believe automobiles will get there. We believe automobiles, once you equip it with the right hardware, this topic is called software-defined vehicles. Once you equip it with the right hardware, you can write apps for it, and you can have the vehicle get its own personality, just like a child gets. You can have the vehicle get its own identity. You can hyper-personalize the vehicle for that application, for that customer. You can have the ecosystem, just like the child learns from school. You can have the ecosystem. You can have startup companies, vendors, writing software for your vehicle. So over time, the vehicle will adapt itself to the personality of the application. So a lot of things to do. Also the fact that given that electric vehicles have a strong place in the future, we are seeing some of the issues with that. in the sense that if you look at some of the key components in electric vehicles, you have motors, you have electronics, you have batteries. You can imagine that we are very dependent on global supply chains for all of these. Motors have permanent magnets, batteries, the cell technology that goes behind it, it's largely made in China, and electronics is made in Taiwan today, and guess who's interested in Taiwan? So if you follow the same exact path to making electric vehicles, if you put a motor in the same place, if you put electronics the same way, if you program it the same way, if you put battery packs, if you use them the same way, then the light at the end of the tunnel is quite clear in the sense that you will end up in a situation where you're completely dependent on a global supply chain. So we are seriously innovating, and I think the crux of that can be the conversation that happens after this introduction. We are completely rethinking electric vehicles as we know it. I mean, you might think, how else can you make an electric vehicle? But you can. So there are ideas that are unique. Excuse me. Can you hear me? Yeah. Uniquely Indian ideas that will, we hope, will revolutionize how a vehicle operates, an electric vehicle operates, how a battery works. Just to give you a little hint, a chemical reaction is not the only way to store charge. There are other ways to store charge. So we are fundamentally rethinking how these things are built, right? And we feel that is essential. We cannot just copy what else is going on in the world. It's a good start because we learn a lot by repeating what someone else has done. So with that, I'd just like to conclude that innovation is something that we're taking extremely seriously. It's a question of survival. It is not a nice to have anymore. And it's essential not just for a company like Ashok Leyland, but for India as a whole. We have the brains and we have to use it and focus it to do something very different for ourselves.
Thank you, Doctor. Can you hear me? Yeah. Good afternoon, all. And thank you, Captain, for having me here. And Varun, straight away jumping to the question that you asked, and I would probably answer it by going about 3 to 4 years backwards on what happened in Mahindra, and that should eventually answer some of the questions that you had put forward. I would start by saying that for an electric vehicle manufacturer, and therefore for the R&D colleagues who are working in electric vehicle manufacturing, this is the golden era. Now, there are multiple reasons why this is a golden era. We all know the engine-driven vehicles have been there for not decades, but centuries now. Therefore, the innovation on the engines and the transmissions and all the powertrain components have been going on for all this time, right from being a very inefficient kerosene engine to where it is today. The electric vehicle has seen the entire development in less than 2 decades, right? And we can see that how much more is left. We could see there is a new innovation punched in literally every month. There are new technologies getting into industrialization every alternate month. That's the scale at which the electric vehicle mobility is doing research, development, and therefore innovation. The additional pressure that comes into product development, you know, in India we have PLI, we have GST at 5% for electric vehicle against 40% for an SUV with the ICE vehicle. You could imagine the 35% which is liberated is an opportunity that the customer can get different technology, which he cannot afford, or we will not be able to give it to him in an ICE vehicle just because he has to pay 35% more tax to buy an ICE vehicle. So the colleagues in R&D have that much more opportunity to pump in technology into an electric vehicle, and therefore the idea of having more and more features pumped in, a little different from what you said on the commercial side, but on the passenger side, a little more pressure on pushing more features. Therefore, understanding what technology exists and what are the potential needs for the customers, and when we bring those technology into the different products, how do we make sure it comes better than the way it is existing today. So that's the motivation for every product development team and engineers who are working to make sure that they are learning new things, they are innovating and bringing the best into the product. Having said that, it's also important that customers look for choices. They do not want to buy the same top hat in the same avatar depending on their own profile. That means it brings a lot of stress on the supply chain to make sure they need to have different components for different top hats. So the way we took it forward, Varun, is we created a platform which was literally 92% common parts. It had the same motor, it had the same battery, it had the same wheel ends, it had the same entire underbody. All that, it had the same electronics. It had exactly the same vehicle architecture. Now the scale is visible. When the customer sees different top hats, he gets choices. But what the supplier sees is a scale of 3 or 4 or 5 different top hats. And that becomes a very strong foundation for building more and more top hats and liberating the core research and development team to innovate on newer technologies and bringing in more features into the customer, into the car. Lastly, I would also like to touch around the agility. When we started electric vehicle mobility, we started the first ever sketch in September 2021. That's when we even thought of getting electric cars into our portfolio. And we did the SOP in September 2024, flat 3 years. This is not because of the skill alone, right? In fact, I would say in September 2021, we had a severe scarcity of skill. Most of us were actually getting transferred from some other functions we were in, including me as part of powertrain. So we were getting migrated from some other core domain, trying to learn electric technology, trying to bring that car into the market. So it was so much about understanding the customer needs, understanding the technology available, understanding the work that needs to be done to enhance the features that go into the hands of the customer. And if that willingness is there, skill will come by nature. You could naturally get that into the R&D guys. Yeah, that's how I would summarize.
Thank you. Thank you. No, the great starting thoughts and really inspiring to hear the stories as well. I think all of you touched on this esoteric concept of a culture of R&D, right? You spoke about impetus and driving value. You spoke about how it's chaotic and yet there's some form of a process to it. Teams that need to learn, continuously learn and have that agency. I think it'll be great to hear from you on how do you build this culture of R&D within a company, just in the journeys that you've had.
Okay. So I'll go with a live example. Maybe you can pretty much relate with a live example. So when I entered this ballroom in the morning, okay, I have got an handout given by these people. Right? I think most of the handouts are also here. So these handouts had a leaflet too inside. And it was an educational institution promoting their brand. Okay. Now, the research that they would have done is, being a forum like this, if we can brand ourselves here, we'll have more people looking at our brand, and hence I would have a conversion to it, right, ideally. So let me put in another lens. Have seen all these handouts lying on the table still. Some of the people have their handouts on the floor, right? And most often than not, end of the day, these handouts go and sit in the trash can. Right? Good research done, good forum chosen, right? And also a lot of thinking that went in to get this branding aspect done. Let me put a different thought to it. What if this handout has been placed in a closed cover and given it to you and you doesn't know it about it? You would be very curious to know what is there in the envelope, right? That would have actually triggered you to open it and see what is there inside. And this would be the first level of jugaad if someone would have thought through, rather than just holding and giving the leaflet as such. Let me actually put it in a closed envelope so that it create a curiosity for the people to open it and see it. And what would be the chance of actually getting this right? Probability is 10-20%. People would open it, look into it. Still, most of the leaflets will go into the trash can. Let me put a different perspective to it. What if I crush the leaflet and give it to a random person in the hall? I'm not handing it over as such. I'm crushing the leaflet and I'm giving it to the person, random person, and it will actually give a curiosity to the order of magnitude of n to see why some random person has come in and actually given a crushed paper to me, and it intrigues me to actually open it and see what is the content into it. So the same leaflet, research is all the same. The lens that you are actually putting out to solve the problem, right, is going to differ. Now, all these are mediums. Whatever I have said are mediums. But end of the day, what is my value creation? The audience whom I am targeting has to actually look at the leaflet, see the brand, conversion should happen, the business should grow, the value gets generated, and also the end users get value, right? So now, this is a live example that I am talking in today. So in any organization, if you have to actually look at R&D, how this particular vertical has to grow, it's not about identical minds sitting in together building a product in closed rooms, right? I have learned something in a very hard way. For the past 2.5 decades I have been in this particular industry. The one thing that I've learned in the very hard way is best brains come together, sit in a closed rooms, build some fascinating product, right? And the people who use it with some common sense, they call it a scrap. Right? They are not PhDs. They don't actually sit in closed rooms, right? They don't know about business. All they see is what is in it for me? Is it adding value or not? So when you actually have that lens coming in your ethos of your R&D, that's when the value creation of that particle would actually come into existence. That's the way the R&D culture has to be set up, right? As said by Subramanian. So these are two different things. You have an R&D as one vertical, innovation as other. It has to go hand in hand. Of course, there's a lot of cost incurred into it. And when you actually see the outcomes, and that outcomes actually live for longer. So I've been part of this group called as Apple earlier. And now I'm working with a prestigious group called as Impact Years, where we actually put a lot of effort into the R&D space, right? And as said by Steve, right, whom I worked with very closely, simple is the most complex things to do, right? Making it simple is the most complex thing. Whether it is him talking in about how the consistent change happened in the EV industry and all, it's all about making things simple. That's the hardest part. So for me, when I look at the R&D, as you asked, how this R&D vertical has to proven in any industry, is about not about identical mindset, not about the technology that you are bringing in, not about the tools that you use, not about the cost that you incur, but end of the day, it's about what value I'm creating in and through this innovation. So that driver, if it goes into the DNA of the company, the R&D will grow. And today, that is the right inflection point India is into. So 10,000 crores of money, right, has been pulled up just because they are seeing that inflection point today. Homegrown LLMs are coming in, homegrown technologies are coming in, we are competing with global players in the world, right? I've also surrendered my citizenship, came back here because I see a lot of visibility here in Indian environment, right? Too many good things are happening, and this is the right space to be in for any R&D guy.
Anything you want to add to this idea of culture?
Yeah. I think very well said, Dr. Bala. I'll put a slightly different spin just to make it more enriching. My father died about 12 years ago, and my daughter was a very small child. She was just a few years old, and she didn't understand what happened, right? But a few months later, she realized her grandfather was missing from the house. And then she came to me and said, I want to talk to my grandfather, right? So how do you explain this to a little child? That aside, independently, we post ourselves a problem, right? Can you use innovation to answer impossible questions? I think what my daughter posed to me was an impossible question. And innovation often helps you solve what seemingly sounds completely impossible. And I'll tell you how I solved this particular question. So you must be thinking I'm crazy, right? Because how do you talk to dead people? You can't. Fortunately, my mother's alive, and hopefully she'll be around with us for some more time. What we developed out of a hobby is an AI tool that she can speak to on a regular basis. And over time, it learns how she talks. It even learns her voice, right? And with enough training, at some point I can start speaking to that AI tool and it will answer just like my mother. So, which means after her time, whenever that is, I will be able to continue speaking to her, and literally I'll have a tool that speaks in her voice and responds to me like she would respond, right? It can only capture a finite amount of her knowledge, but in some sense it would be a great consolation. So 2 minutes ago you thought this problem was unsolvable, right? But there are ways to innovate that make such problems solvable. I think that is a huge inspiration. We actually pose unsolvable problems to our people, and it becomes a natural magnet to bring in energy and enthusiasm. Even if that problem is not 100% solved, we will get pretty close, and that's a very fascinating outcome of that exercise. We also use many other mantras for inspiring people to do innovation and R&D. I was giving this will be my second and final example, I can keep going, but I was giving a school lecture at a high school, and this was 6th standard students, just the first year of geometry that was creeping into the syllabus. So I asked the students, there was a class like this, I said, can you come to the board and draw a 60-degree angle for me? And if you remember, if you take your mind back to high school, you will remember there was a problem like this in maths that was posed to you, where without using a protractor, using only a ruler and a compass, you're supposed to draw a 60-degree angle, right? So almost everybody in the class knew how to do it. And if to remind you, you draw one arc and then you draw one more arc, and where those two intersect, you draw a line and then you get 60 degrees, right? But then my next question was, if you do this, why do you get 60 degrees? And then the whole class went silent. And to me also it was a realization that that is where you stop questioning. Everybody learned how to solve that problem. They kind of mugged up that entire procedure, probably wrote the exam and got the marks as well. But nobody wanted to question why that very simple technique of just 2 steps would give that 60-degree angle, right? So literally we started a program where we wanted people to go back to fundamentals, go back to the very basics of science and start delving in depth into why certain things work, right? And it was amazing how much innovation that process would spawn. These are very, very simple facts that you simply read through in your textbook in school, and then you forgot to think deeply about it or didn't care, right? But that process is so inspiring and it's so simple that it gives extremely profound ideas. And this kind of brings back a quote of Ramanujan. He said, an equation to me has no meaning unless it expresses a thought of God. Right? It says an equation to me has no meaning unless it expresses a thought of God. For him, it was God. For you, it could be nature, it could be physics. But the real thing he was trying to say was, what does that equation even mean unless you understand what nature is trying to tell you through that? So that is something we practice day in, day out. And that inspires innovation quite a bit.
I should point out at this point that there are two people with doctor and their before their names who are basically saying you don't need to lock yourself up in a lab for 5 years to come up with innovation and R&D. It's about curiosity, simplicity, and just that desire to drive value. But
Good, Varun. So again, a story. If you manage to get the R&D engineer to believe that the problem really needs to be solved, the problem is already solved. Now, the product is ready, the jury is done, and the jury says, I need a rating of 8, it's a 7.5. What do? You say you are not ready for the launch and therefore you need to do something about it, right? This is natural. Now, the guy who has worked on that product for last 2.5 years, 3 years, he's so passionate about what he has done, he's just not able to believe that there's something more to do. For him, it's just perfect, right? And we just could not bridge this gap, and we just could not believe that we can do something about it. What we did is we introduced something called as a family jury. Now, what is this family jury? We asked the spouse and the kids of the employees to come to office. We asked them to drive the car. Right? So they were sitting in the car. If they were eligible to drive, they were driving the car. And we asked them to comment about decisions. So the rating actually went from 7.5 to 7. Okay? But this time it was that much more easier to solve. Trust me, in 2 months all the problems are solved. When their own spouse, their own children were telling them that this is not okay, you did not need any explanation beyond just not okay. And this really happened. Really, really happened. So when we launched the XCV 700 before the BEVs, we did exactly this, and we got a leap jump on the level of quality improvement that we did, right from engineering to part development to actual launch. And this is culture. Again, going back to what I was saying before, it's so much to do with what is there in your mind than what skill set you really carry. Right? And this is a fantastic example for us, and we continue this culture now. We do regular evaluation, and we have no arguments in any closed room saying that should we do it or should we not do it. Yeah?
I love the idea of a family jury. I think the only reason I cook even half decently is because of the family jury. Maybe if we look at the other side of the coin, you've all established that if you do good work, there will be a market for it, right? Ultimately, you need to listen to customers, etc. But if you do good work, there will be a market for it. And yet, at least when I started, I said the amount we spend on R&D is lower when compared to some of the larger economies that we see. Is there more we can do? And if so, what are the challenges we're facing to breaking that ceiling?
I think it's $1 million question, literally. So I think we are not there yet, honestly, right? We should be spending a much larger fraction of our turnover, or at least a large fraction of our profits, and put it back into research and development. There is a lot of inherent lack of appetite to take risk. I've seen a lot of Indian companies, and it's a self-criticism as well, who would pay more to acquire a mature technology rather than pay less and take the risk and develop it internally. That is changing, right? For sure it is changing, especially the last decade, especially, again, I can speak for automotive, because now it's a question of survival. So that change is happening. There is also an internal, back to culture, there's a little cultural element. For those who have been fortunate enough to have grandparents at home, you will see that there is a very interesting interaction between a grandparent and a grandchild. It's not the same interaction between the parent and the child. The parent and the child, the parent tends to micromanage. The parent is very worried about the child all the time. The grandparent is much more at ease, right? The grandparent brings in a lot of wisdom. The child brings in a lot of the millennial Gen Z type features, right? R&D is that millennial Gen Z within that enterprise, within that legacy enterprise. So how does that family or the enterprise handle that newfound thing, which is that Gen Z type thinking, right? So that's where that cultural element comes in. So going from that parent style of management to that grandparent style of management, where you have wisdom interacting with Gen Z, rather than a keen micromanagement, well-intended but very tight micromanagement, interacting with Gen Z is actually a winner. We have seen this work. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
And maybe a question for you. You spoke about how you came back here and there's a lot that's happening in India. Where do you see the difference with respect to the innovation ecosystem, R&D ecosystem here, and what can we learn as well?
See, the competitive landscape is everywhere, irrespective of the geo that you are in. And also the adoption is very fast these days. I'll tell about my perspective, my 2 cents. Earlier, the life cycle of adoption of any technology, any innovation, any good stuff, it used to be a considerable good time, right? Any new product comes into the market 10 years before, 15 years before, people used to actually adapt it, live with it for a considerable amount of time. But in the recent few years, if you happen to see recent 6 years, 7 years, where there is much hype about the AI coming in, there are many new products even today coming up, right? Many new models coming up, many good stuff that is happening in, but the adaptability, validity period has drastically come down, right? The obsoleteness are also going up in the drastic way. The way that you are adapting to the technology, the obsoleteness is also happening in the same way. Now, this phenomenon is all because of the sheer ignorance. So what happens, I actually trace back to the previous question and with this as well. See, most of the time why people hesitate to put a lot of money in the R&D and see it still as a capital intensive exercise because of the sheer ignorance of the building blocks that they own. They may not be very good. The building blocks that are in the ecosystem today of any organization, right, has to be structured first. Then adoption of any new innovation, any R&D will have a considerable value to the company. Today, that's where the tangential happens. People don't understand the building blocks, are they right? And then invest on a tech like AI, invest much, and then after a point in time, they understand it is not yielding and see that the entire building is tumbled down. This is because of the ignorance. Now, coming up to the second question that you have asked, what made me to come here? So what is it happening? And there are a lot of examples that has been given by the speakers since morning, right? Sarvam.ai has picked up a 10,000 crore project with the government of Chennai, right? There is an AI summit that is happening in Delhi, right? Believe me it or not, the prices for a hotel in Delhi for that event has shooted up around 1.5 lakh. This is still because of AI only. AI has drastically actually pumped up the changes of prices, and then every player who is selling out rooms there has actually inflated the prices. So what I am trying to say here, right? End of the day, the entire global landscape is up for transformation, up for innovation, up for R&D. And now, never late than ever, India is also actually pumping up a lot of what money, also put in a lot of focus in trying to actually get this ball rolling in the way that it wants to see. I'm also part of NASCOM Product Council, right? I'm also part of 10,000 Startups Initiative, AI Initiative. I'm mentoring a lot of AI companies today here in India. There is a lot of potential. So earlier we used to see a lot of people joining many organizations, right? And it's more of an employment landscape. But here today, 2 people or 3 people come in and they say like, I'm an entrepreneur, I have got an idea, I'm bringing this up. Because now here in India, there is a scope for such kind of change happening. And so this confidence is even given the Indian government to put in a lot of money. They are seeing a lot of budding entrepreneurs in every space. You take any space today. And fundamentally, the other thing that I wanted to put in a thought to many of the people here. So many people think that, okay, I'm building one of the products that have never existed before, right? But that's not true. Somebody in some part of the world would have thought through this. It has not been implemented, that's it. So what I am saying is the execution is the key cycle for everything. So if you have to ensure the country's economy is growing fast with a lot of R&D put in together, it has to be directly proportional to the execution cycle of the product. Otherwise, you still see it as a capital intensive part in any organization. This has to change. That's how I put it.
I think sticking to the theme of AI, the discourse on this is quite varied, right? From doomsday scenarios to how you can launch cars at a fraction of the time and cost compared to what we did in the past. I think would love to hear your view on what's actually happening on the ground and how do you see this playing out?
So on the AI, two extreme things. One, how do we make sure customer voice is easily heard, right? From that point of view, just imagine X number of cars going to dealership for service action, and we have so many different verbatims getting factored somewhere, and there are 50,000 line items today, and we don't know what is the real product feedback coming from there. And it's humanly impossible to bring a method to understand what are customer feedback coming from there. Now, here you are already seeing AI helping us, directly telling us what should we be doing. Forget about telling where are the concerns. So this is one extreme of front end trying to take care of what the R&D folks should be doing. The other extreme is simply the time required to convert a red status of a CAE simulation to a green status is migrating to become faster and faster, because there are easier solutions available to try and achieve the results faster, and this definitely allows the product development to become much faster than where we are today. So these are the two extremes of trying to manage information going to product development at a faster rate, and within product development doing something at a faster rate. So that's how we are seeing it happening already.
Maybe I'll just speak to the other side of the coin. I'll give an example of what did not work. So we were in our conventional vehicles, not electric vehicles, creating an AI model which would predict the failure of certain components before they would happen. In particular, we were working on predicting the failure of a clutch, because the clutch is typically the weak link in an automotive powertrain. It's meant to be that. It's meant to be like a fuse. It's meant to fail first if the vehicle is abused, so that thereby protecting other components. But if that same clutch fails in the middle of the highway, given that it's a truck, then it's a problem, because the vehicle may be down for a day or two just to get it repaired. So we were doing this model, AI model, to predict how a clutch fails. We actually outsourced it to a very well-established company, certified and it has everything to do with AI and all that. Gave them about 2 months to make this model, gave them the data. Unfortunately, they miserably failed. Just did not work with AI. The missing piece was the knowledge of AI and the domain. right? And that's the hardest skill to find. You need people who know automotive and people who know AI, right? Or at least within a team, you need that combination. So we are now constantly getting either AI analytics people and training them in automotive, or upskilling our own automotive people into AI, just so that that combination works.
Awesome. So let's.
I wanted to just share, just taking a minute. Of course, I don't belong to the EV industry, but I've seen it very close. One of the thoughts that I wanted to share when I was sharing dias with Elon, who is famous for this particular industry even today, right? So one of the questions that was asked is, what makes you the front runner in this space? So he said, like, okay, you think Tesla as a car manufacturing company, what is the end product that we do? Is what the question that he asked back. The people said it was the car, right? Then he differed, no, we build factories that build cars. That's our product. We invest a lot of money, we invest a lot of R&D, we invest a lot of energies in building factories that manufactures cars. Our end product is not cars, our end product is factories. So that's a fundamental shift of thought, right, that Tesla has taken, right? And one of the things they have done right from the start, which I've been seeing close, is what he has shared. The domain knowledge getting along with the artificial intelligence. The human intelligence getting along with the artificial intelligence, improving the quality of it every now and then. So I think this is a phenomenon for every industry. Irrespective of EV, I'm talking about any industry, it should be complementing human and artificial intelligence, complementing each other would actually drive the value.
Great thought, great thought. In fact, I'm sure auto companies will start calling themselves software companies very soon, just given what goes into a car today. We'll just take a couple of questions from the audience. So a very easy one for you, Bala, to start with. So I think, I can't see the name, Krish. Krish's question is, India has a strong engineering talent base and we do well with applied engineering, but how can we move up the value chain towards foundational research, original IP creation, especially in AI and emerging tech?
Yeah. So this is some question that has been asked to me by multiple people. So that's where I again allude to the same answer. It is no more just an independent skill. AI is not just an independent skill. It has to actually get complemented with domain knowledge. That is what is expected in today's economy. So if you are actually working in an edutech space, you need to understand the business ecosystem of an edutech space. If you are looking at an EV, you need to understand the business ecosystem, right? The nomenclature of it. So I'll tell you a very simple example. If you are an engineer, right? If you are asked to write a program to add and delete, it is easy for you. But if a business person comes in and tell you, could you write me a program to actually do a credit and debit? You need to understand what is credit and what is debit. Otherwise, if you go the otherwise, the entire system will tumble down, right? So what I'm saying is anything that you do has to actually be alluding to the business knowledge. Engineering is no more an independent skill. AI is no more an independent skill. It should actually go with your business knowledge. So that's where your patents or the investments in your specific, or moving up the ladder or to be on the top 1% of the hires. If you want it to be that, you need to have some domain expertise as well coming in. So that is how I wanted to answer.
And Krish, the direction of travel is good as well. More than a quarter of the patents that India currently files for is in the AI space. So I think that we're moving in the right direction as well. A question for Ganesh: How can Indian EV innovation move from cost efficiency towards a source of global differentiation?
So, first of all, it's a wrong understanding that we are just trying to cost effectively producing EV. We are trying to bring value to the customer finally, and as long as that is the intent, global is not far away. Just to give an example, you might be buying a cell from somewhere, but the very research that happens within our facility in Chennai, we get to a point where we decide what should be the carbon coating thickness on the electrodes to understand how fast a lithium ion can go and sit back in an anode during charging. Why? Because we want to give a 19-minute charging cycle from 15% to 85%. Now, if that is the goal, then you are only looking at value creation, you are only looking at how to bring a customer wow. You are not trying to save 5 rupees out of a cell and trying to achieve cost competitiveness there. Of course, cost is important, and there are many other levers to try and do cost competitiveness. But the primary objective must be to make sure that the customer values the product for what he is spending for, and therefore that should be always attempted to be made more and more reliable and more valued.
Absolutely. Moving to Subramaniam, how can Indian manufacturing companies drive R&D into a core part of their strategy rather than as a support function?
Yeah, so it's actually an easy question. I used to run a manufacturing entity before this. I think one answer is sheer necessity. Anybody who's run a manufacturing unit will realize that every year your customers will beat you down on cost. So you have to make your product cheaper and cheaper and cheaper every year. Every year your labor will need increment. So your input costs will go up, your raw material costs typically go up. So at some point you will reach a point where you won't make profits, hence the need for R&D, right? So there are two kinds of R&D you go after. One is the R&D which gives you innovative ways of manufacturing, which you can make your manufacturing itself smarter. And when I say smarter, I mean, I'm not talking about full-fledged IoT and stuff like that. That is obviously part of smart manufacturing, but we've even done things as simple as GPS tags and WhatsApp groups with our vendors. That itself is smart. At least that we ask them to post photographs of where they are in their manufacturing sequence so that they don't give us stories on when they will send us the parts for us to assemble. So there are very, very simple things you can do with tech in manufacturing itself. And of course, if you are a product company, if you're not just a manufacturing services company, then this is the point where you innovate on the product. Otherwise, you don't survive, right? Because your margins are effectively zero. So ultimately, it's a cultural thing. It has to come from the top. The management has to decide to invest in R&D. And precisely to fill this kind of gap, because a lot of manufacturing entities are MSMEs, and it's hard for them to develop the multidisciplinary setups required for R&D, is why we started into this R&D as a service kind of offering, where I believe it's an essential part of the ecosystem. So you have academia, you have government, you have large industries with their own R&D, but you also need people providing contract type R&D services, so that not everybody needs to have their own internal R&D. They can always source it from other people.
A bit of a prescient answer, because that's linked to the next question that's coming through as well, around collaboration and ecosystems, right? What role does industry, startups, academia, government, that collaboration, what role does it play? And based on what you've seen, maybe I'll start with you, Bala, based on what you've seen, what can we do better?
See, I see it as a loop, actually. So first, it's like in cultivation. You need to sow the seeds of it right from the institutions, like college institutions, right? When you're at the school, you need to have that kind of what if experiments to be carried out. So as he said it right, asking questions is the most fundamental thing that you could do, which would actually drive you that impetus of R&D. So that should happen right from the schooling and also from the institution. And today, most often than not, I actually love this joke. So what is the sequence of becoming a chef? Do the engineering become a chef? What is the sequence of becoming and what an entrepreneur? Do engineering become an entrepreneur? Right? So there is a sequence that is followed, which is fundamentally wrong. Okay. If you are going to actually have that impetus that you can add value to some particular ecosystem, right? You need to start actually looking at it very close. So this is not happening in India. So that's where the company that I am actually part of today where we are looking at giving this kind of transition, right? Right from the cultivation of that knowledge from the college and getting it up to the space of the work culture, wherein there is a consistent innovation, consistent knowledge transfer happening, and where you have a lot of mentorships, right, that can happen. And continuously you evolve every day. So in the scheme of things, even government today has actually taken up these initiatives, right, wherein there is the NHRD, right, many institutions, even you had other session where people internally are upskilling every day, right? I heard from one of the speakers saying that they have this kind of hackathons going in internally. So this should become the culture, right? Then only it can become an integral part. So fundamentally, what I'm trying to say is it's a loop. And this should actually start from the institution that you are part of and then grow up to the way that you are upskilling your career. And it should not be the other way around. The value creation has to happen to the ecosystem that you wanted to be part of, right? I preferred working with computers, right, at my age, and I still prefer I love doing things. So that's how it should be. So the transition should be more of doing what you know rather than doing what you love. So then actually the R&D comes into play, the innovation comes into play, the value addition comes into play, and this entire ecosystem actually will be a kind of rider for you. Otherwise, it would be kind of a derailed stuff. So that's the thing that needs to happen. And of course, today, as I said, even many and distinguished speakers today saying that is the inflection point that we are in today. So every part of the ecosystem is up for it. Government, institutions, right? These kind of forums, grabbing in together, everybody is up for it actually. We need to leverage it. That's all we have to do.
Thank you. And just as we wrap this up, a couple of things that just stood out as we had this conversation. I think there was a unanimous push for R&D needs to be focused on value, right? Value to ecosystems, value to the market, etc. So I think there's a consistent theme of how do we use innovation to generate value, because then the market creates itself. Second is this idea of culture. Right? How do you excite colleagues to be curious? How do you take the grandparent mode of using wisdom as a guide rather than the parent mode of setting rules to how we do it? Right? A big part of the culture of R&D. Third is some practices. The family jury standing out as a very, very interesting way to push people to keep trying and bettering what they do. And finally, the whole idea of building the ecosystem. This has been an extremely fascinating conversation. So thank you, Ganesh, Subramaniam, and Bala for sharing your thoughts and sharing your wisdom with all of us.
Thank you, Varun. Been a fabulous session. Ladies and gentlemen, may I now invite on the stage Mr. Kumar, our committee member. Then General Chauhan, please join us for honoring these dignitaries on the stage. Mr. Sitaraman, Vice President MMA, may I request you to please come up on the stage, sir, to hand over a memento to these lovely gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll agree with me that it's been a fabulous session. And with these kind of bright young minds leading R&D in different institutions, I think all of us can be assured that we are on the right path to innovating many things in decades to come. Let's give them a big round of applause. It's been a fabulous session. Ladies and gentlemen, we had Bala Tanjore, a triple PhD holder, lovely Mr. Kanaka Sakapati Subramaniam has been leading the R&D in Ashok Leyland, and Ganesh leading the EV vehicle R&D at Mahindra & Mahindra. Fabulous minds there. And Varun, thanks a lot for facilitating the entire discussion so well. Thanks a lot. Well, as they take a group photograph, let's give them a round of applause. Thanks a lot. It's been lovely having all of you with us together on stage, leading fantastic initiatives. Wishing you all the very best. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are moving on to the last session of this convention now, session 4, on a very special theme, that's DNA of future leaders. And you're going to see some excellent leaders coming up on the stage now.